Yo, partnership alert, partnership alert, partnership alert. Living Corporate has a partnership with LinkedIn Learning, an American massive open online course provider that provides video courses taught by industry experts across a wide array of subjects. Now, the partnership is because Living Corporate has courses on LinkedIn Learning focused on diversity, equity, inclusion for leaders, career professionals, and anyone really looking to upskill themselves and be better allies. So make sure you check out our courses on LinkedIn Learning by clicking the link in the show notes. And let's just say you don't want to do that. When you go to LinkedIn Learning on LinkedIn, search Living Corporate. We'll be right there. All right. Peace. What's up, y'all? It's Zach with Living Corporate, and all right, it's time. I got the news. I've been talking about the news. Excited for y'all to check this out. Excited for y'all to listen. Make sure you're paying attention, making sure you're subscribed, etc., etc. I've been saying it for like a month now, right? I'm finally ready to talk about what's going on. All right, I'm finally ready to share with y'all why I'm so excited about Living Corporate and what we got going on, not just the rest of this year, but like moving forward, right? So in a week, we are launching something new. We are launching something new in a week's time, right? Literally in a week, right? So set your timers. And I'm gonna put a link in here for you to subscribe so you can be notified. Make sure you're ready when it goes live. We're launching something new in a week. All right. No, I'm not gonna tell you what it is. Now you're gonna have to subscribe. You're gonna have to pay attention. You're gonna have to follow us on socials to see what that thing is. But in a week, it's litty out here. All right. I'm not playing. So make sure you're tapped in, because in a week, it is going down. All right. I'm serious. Don't play with me. Don't be like, yo, nobody told me. I didn't see this. When did this go up? What happened? Nah, I'm telling you right now, it's going up. All right. And it's going to be stuck when it's up there too. All right. Listen, I'm really excited about today's episode. Look, I have a lot of people that I engage with and I talk to through social media. And frankly, like, social media continues to be like one of the biggest blessings to me. I recognize that it has its myriad of challenges. And I can say that it's blessed me that I've been able to connect with so many talent leaders, executives, etc., etc. And look, I'm excited about the fact that I was able to have Miss Haynes, who is the VP of Talent and DEI at the Leaf Group, on Living Corporate. And I'm just really excited about that. I'm thankful for the fact that she was able to make the time, and I'm honored by her work and just her authenticity in this space. And so the next thing you're going to hear after the tap in with Tristan is my conversation with her to talk a bit about not just what's happening at the Leaf Group, but just what's going on. That's why we titled this thing, What's Going On? You know what I mean? Like, what's actually going on? You're looking around. You're seeing DEI teams get cut left and right. You're seeing folks seemingly like kind of go back to home base, innovating less, investing less in things that are risky because you're looking at the market, at things that they perceive as risky. It's funny because anything that's related to Black and brown people is risky. Yet when you want to innovate and build or like grow new markets, that's where you go first. Anyway, listen. We will talk to you on the other half of this tap-in, and I'm looking forward to you checking out this discussion. Talk to you soon.
What's going on, Living Corporate? It's Tristan, and I want to thank you for tapping back in with me as I provide some tips and advice for professionals. Today, let's talk about references during a job search. Throughout your job search, you may be asked to provide references. It's important that you understand the point of references, when you should start thinking about them, who to pick, and how to present the information. So let's dive into it. When a potential employer asks you to provide a reference or references, they typically want to speak with a previous employee, coworker, or manager. Many people wonder why references are even requested in the first place. Well, over the past couple of years, various laws have made it difficult for recruiters and hiring managers to get information out of previous employers. So, many companies started requesting references to speak to someone who can vouch for you. It's important to start thinking about who you want to list as a reference towards the beginning of your job search. Most companies will request 3 references, so that's a safe number to secure. You need to select someone who not only knows you, but can clearly speak to your performance and your potential using a professional lens. They need to be able to provide tangible examples of your work. This means I don't recommend you select parents, other relatives, or friends. You want to pick trusted previous or current coworkers, managers, or clients that will say positive things about their experiences with you and the value you provided. Once you've narrowed down the people, you need to reach out to them to see if they would be willing to even give you a recommendation and speak about your work with potential employers. I cannot stress this enough. Do not, and I mean do not, share people's information without getting their approval first. If they consent, gather their most up-to-date contact information and share the type of role you're looking for or the job description and a copy of your current resume. Instead of taking up space by listing your references on your resume, I suggest you create a references document formatted similarly to your resume. This document would house all of your contacts' names, job titles, their relation to you, email addresses, and phone numbers. This way, when a potential employer asks you to provide references, you have everything ready to go and you don't need to scramble. Finally, don't forget to thank your references for helping you advance your career. This tip was brought to you by Tristan of Layfield Resume Consulting. Check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Layfield Resume, or connect with me, Tristan Layfield, on LinkedIn.
Tara, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hey, what's going on, Zach? How are you?
I'm doing well. You know what? It's so great to finally connect on the pod and just to see you and hear your voice. I know that we've been following each other for a while. Narcissistic question, but I'm curious. What prompted you to follow me on Twitter?
So first and foremost, one of my Aubrey will hear this, but I discovered Aubrey a few years ago, and Aubrey Greenwich, and I think when she was at Atlassian, and I was like, I'm just gonna know everything about this person, like whatever she's saying on social, like whatever. I'm just so gravitated to philosophy and execution, and the people around this person will help me grow as well, right? And so I think social media is a necessary evil, right? I would love to be able to just like go somewhere and read a book, but this is how we also build community, which is really important to me. And so the pleasure that I get out of it is finding community, finding people who help me grow. You were one of these people for sure, where I was just like, I really love what's coming out of this kind of dialogue, and I just want to know more about this person and like what they're doing. And so, yeah, and it was just important for me to selfishly, I just want to grow. Like,
I love it. And you know, it's interesting because one, I think that like social media can be like such a really weird, it can be a really weird place where it's like you see people and you kind of you see a part of them and you really think that you know them, but you really haven't gotten to you really haven't gotten to know them. You see like a very like, I mean, again, depending on how you use social media, most times you're seeing like a fairly controlled version of this person, and frankly, like snapshots of the controlled version of this person in over time that they want you to see. And so it's interesting because like the more like as Living Corporate continues to grow, and as I just grow in my career, you know, like the people like I'll meet on socials. And sometimes, you know, you meet them, you know, you have a connection like this, you meet them in person, it's like, oh, this wasn't really what I expected. Like,
Right.
what happened to the you that you created
Right.
and let me see
Mm-hmm.
online? You know, so
Right.
anyway, I'm
Yep.
just really excited the fact that we're actually able to have a real conversation. I'm thankful for your work. Thank you for being a guest on the show. Let's talk a little bit about
Yep.
your journey, right? You're an executive at the Leaf Group.
So weird to hear that. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
um, and your role, you're the VP of DEI and talent management. And I think
Yeah.
let's start with the intersection of
Yeah.
talent management, leadership, and DEI. Like, talk to me about how those things come together.
So I'll even rewind a little bit.
Yeah.
I got a theater degree. I'm a playwright, and early on, my professors were like, "Look, sis, you're not gonna make any money doing theater. Like, even if you're on Broadway, you'll still have like 17 other jobs." And and I was like, "Cool, great, understand that. What can I do to feed my brain in the meantime? Like while I'm doing this," and got
Yeah.
into administrative work, really focused on industries that I wanted to be in. Like I worked at Penguin Putnam. I was, at Variety, like all these different kind of like learning and kind of artistic environments. And even then, still faced representation issues. Like, I think I've talked about this before, where like one recruiter was like, "You'll have to take your braids out because they're not professional," and I was like, "Well, they're permanent, so we're just gonna have to have a problem, or I don't know." And so, you never lose that, right? Like that uphill battle to get the role that fully accepts you, even if you're not in DEI. Like DEI is like almost like a recent like a thing, right? Like, but we've always had it. We just like named it.
Yeah.
So I got into talent because I had a mentor that really believed that I had a really good judge of people, and wanted to pour into me how to kind of facilitate people getting the roles and matching people for the good role for them. Always been an in-house recruiter. And so been at Leaf Group, we're the parent company to multiple lifestyle brands that are really exciting, Society 6, Well and Good, all these kind of really impactful brands that have communities and consumers at the same time. And so was doing talent, and then the DEI role came up because of a lot of things. Like, as most companies, 2 years ago, George Floyd gets murdered. Everyone is at home, pandemic. People are looking at themselves like, how do we get here? Nobody, everybody has their own different answers. So the role came up. I worked hard to really be qualified for it. I studied, I talked to people, I did my due diligence. It wasn't just because I was already there that they were going to give it to me. So I wanted to be qualified for it. This is when I started getting into the communities that are on Twitter and really digging deep and doing my research. But the philosophy was, our inclusion efforts as a company start when the person applies. Like the very first intersection or interaction that you have with the candidate and the company is where it should all start. And then that whole process of going through that process of getting hired and getting to know each other. And then after you're here, retention, how mobility, like all of the different things. We're still in the early infancy. Like, we are not far along like other companies, and that's fine. I've really learned to temper my own patience, which I think is like the biggest thing. And when I talk to other DEI colleagues, we're all just like, we may just need to slow our rolls and discover, like, this is the long haul. Like, we can't tomorrow be like, flip a switch and be like, DEI, good to go. Like we're early. So a lot of the things that we've been doing is really looking at data metrics, which, again, thanks to Culture Amp, I fall in love with now. I understand data. Was not a math person in any of my schooling at all.
Yeah.
So like, this is a whole new thing for me. But like, now that it's learning how to tell the story is really important. And then continuing on, like filling in gaps, educational gaps. I do believe we don't all have uniform education. So the challenge is that we're all working together and don't know enough about each other in order to facilitate all of the innovation and creativity that leaders expect when you're talking about DEI and culture and whatever all that is. We have a little bit of work to do there. So that's where we are in our whole journey, and really excited about it.
It's interesting you talk about like that work starts like at the very initial point of engagement, right? Like the work around like just the work of DEI and like engaging talent. I mean, it's curious because like you think about like the concept of employee experience.
Right.
I think some people still see like diversity, equity, and inclusion as like this separate kind of like
Right.
cute nugget on the shelf of employee experience,
Yeah.
but that's not really employee experience. It's like, no, like DEI is relevant, like making sure that folks are included and they're being
Right.
treated equitably, and frankly that they have a diverse
Yes.
experience as it pertains to just like what they're able to learn, the people they're able to talk to. Like that's
Right.
important for everybody, not just Black and brown people. It's important for all employees.
Correct. And I think and I say this all the time, like DEI is not just like the fun, cool, like social events where we have we do have those,
Right.
but it's also like the really hard, challenging parts where you look at like how, your own preconceived notions are preventing that access and that inclusion. And like, you can't come in with your own built-in story, no matter what your background is, like, because we all have like a built-in story. Can you break those down so that you do actually achieve the environment that you say you want, right? I think that's really such an important thing. And so there's hard work to do that you have to be open to doing. Like when I was in college, I took a class called The Whiteness of Blackness. I went to a really I went to Eugene Lang, part of the New School, so definitely like nerd alert, like kind of school. But the class was about like The Whiteness of Blackness was a literary class about like the Harlem Renaissance. So we studied Nella Larson, Quick Hand and Passing, and so our professor at the time, Gary Lemons, said to this very liberal mixed group of 12, what privileges are you willing to give up so that everyone has equal access, right? All of you. And so like those are the things you talk about to a freshman, sophomore college class. And that really resonated with me because he wasn't just talking to like the white students. He was just talking about all of us. All of us have a level of privilege that may be preventing another person from having the same experience that they should be having with us, right? Like, so it just, a lot of things like when you plant the seed and you think about like how you got to where you are, there were a lot of little nuggets that helped me, I think, grow and think about things in this way.
I didn't, you and I did not talk before this, so I'm going to ask this question.
Right.
Talk to me about your relationship with human resources as a DEI professional at the Leaf Group. What does that look like?
So it's interesting. I do not, I'm not part of HR. I right now report into the chief administrative officer, who also has other departments. So talent and DEI are separate. We definitely have a people team. Work very closely with them, just as closely as I do with FP&A and like other, you know what I mean, like other teams. My goal for this role is to be more in simpatico with multiple other departments, doing a little bit of work with each of the different departments on vision statements and goals and KPIs as it relates to integrating DEI. Like, I don't want to be, like you said, that separate on the shelf kind of like book that you pull out when you're like, okay, so I think there's a spell or a recipe for this, if that's what you're looking for. But I want it to be it should be like, I would love for it to just be part of that day-to-day operations, and that's what we're working towards.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like we have several folks on, as you know, and like we talk about HR. I think you and I the other day we were looking. I think I shared some article right about like role of HR and like it's so curious, right? Like I think and I was because my follow-up question was going to be what's the reporting structure. I think that if I was ever to like leave my current role and like, let's say I wanted to continue and like take a DEI role, like a chief or like an executive role, if I saw that it didn't report to the COO or the CEO, that would be a flag for me.
I agree with you. And I think it's really challenging. And so I've had this conversation with like other HR people.
Yeah.
And I think one of the challenging things I think that we all need to kind of embrace is that there's traumas that have been enacted from traditional, and I'm not saying all, because I do not believe it's all, because there are a lot of HR people out there who are like breaking down doors and creating these
100%.
spaces.
100%.
But they have a lot of work to do to overcome the reputation of those who really prevented a lot of access and did harms and traumas. And so it's going to take some time, but there are a lot of people who just, you could be the best HR person, but if some other person pre you has scarred them, that is going to be a while. And so like DEI would be no exception. Like people, there has to be this level of trust, especially when you're talking about DEI and all these different things. Like, how can I really show up to be myself if it's under HR and I had this really traumatic experience 2 jobs ago where this person like did not have my best interest at heart? Because I think there was a whole Twitter storm at some point where somebody was talking about like HR is just for the company. And I feel like there are some that are like that, but I know so many people who are like people first for real, like to the point where they do have these behind the scenes conversations with other executives, and not at Leaf Group, but in general, to advocate and go above and beyond. But like you have to hear a lot more of those stories, and that time is really going to be important in overcoming those kind of perceptions.
Let's talk a little bit about like, you're grown, right, Tara? Like you've been moving around. Yeah, you are grown. You're grown.
Yeah.
Like let's talk a little bit about like, you've been in these spaces doing your thing. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about some of like your biggest pet peeves of just like being an executive doing DEI work. Like what are some of the things you're like, oh man, if I could change this one thing, I promise.
I really feel like people need to, we're in such the infancy stage about what we're all trying to achieve. And my own impatience comes where I feel like communication is not, like we're not on the same page, even though you feel like you're saying the thing, because past traumas and other situations, people still hear something differently. And I don't think there's a difference between executive and non-executive. I'm talking like across an organization, like people are still themselves. One of the most amazing things I think, and one of the reasons why I also took this kind of role, is like a couple of years ago, I heard Michelle Kim at a culture summit in San Francisco. And she really hit home when she said, your people can't compartmentalize what's going on in the world at work. And you should not expect them to. They are still who they are. And if they're affected by, violence or, war or, abortion rights or anything like that, how do you expect them to work on that presentation if they are literally sitting there just like going through traumas? And so trying to push your project along with all of these different things happening to people, it's a long-winded answer, but it's not a person, it's about a thing, like where it's like something's always going to be happening. So how can we work collectively together to feel like we're actually making change? And I want people to feel like they're comfortable enough to speak about these things so that we can push forward. I think there's a lot of fear and a lot of like people who are from old school environments where you don't talk about who you are, and that prevents a lot of the progress I think that we would like to see, because everything is connected. And that's the thing, is like, I guess the long and the short of it is that my pet peeve is that people do not see that everything is connected.
Yeah, like the lack of like systems thinking is problematic. And I think it like, some of it also just comes from just not slowing down enough. I think like we talk about the past year or so, I've been talking more explicitly about like just like this hyper capitalistic, late stage capitalist culture that we're in, where like everything is focused on production and this like manufactured sense of urgency to do everything right now.
Yesterday. Not right now. We're like literally like yesterday. It's too late today.
Right. Right. I mean, like, I'm curious, like, as you also brought up abortion rights and the fact that like, that we're regressing into limiting uh, people's
Yeah.
choices
Yeah.
to make decisions around their own bodies. I'm curious,
Yeah.
like, what is the Leaf Group doing in that regard as it pertains to their employees? Like, you see Amazon, they're doing some benefits, and there's other companies out there like willing to cover costs and pay. Like, what is the
Yeah.
Leaf Group doing as a response, or like, is there anything in process or in planning
Right.
to do?
So the thing about it is that we are 400 people globally. We're
Hmm.
not in any of the areas right now that are affected. So we're a smaller company. We
Mm-hmm.
do have an ERG that is women focused, where we did have a conversation about it. We shared resources. We resurfaced our benefits that definitely are friendly in terms of that. But like, it's a conversation that needs to be had, because we're not yet at that place where we have people who that I know of, right? Also, because people aren't like divulging, but are directly affected. But I think if you're a larger company, which I love, is like you should be able to stand on the benefits and the resources that you have to extend. I'm actually happy to see a lot of these companies, and I'm surprised, actually. I don't know, I'm gonna surprise like in a good way. I don't know why I'm always like, oh boy, I feel like the rate of we're regressing as a society already, I almost don't expect
Right.
like hope at some point. You know
Well,
what I
no, I
mean?
mean,
Like,
it's reasonable. Like, yeah, I hear you.
right.
Yes.
Yeah. So when those statements come out, I think, wow, okay, so maybe we do like have a shot at this. I don't know. Like, and then something else happened. I don't know. Like, I just keep going up and down. But the long story short of it is, we as a company share resources, but have not directly had to do something directly that I know of.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's helpful. I mean, I think, and I think it's also important that, like, what you do is relevant and meaningful to your organization, right? Like, so many times I feel like, there are organizations who go, well, what's everybody else doing? It's like, well, like,
Yeah.
okay, but we all do that, right? It's just very much so
Yeah.
follow the leader, which is like why I always appreciate orgs who are like, no, like, I don't really care. We don't care what
Right.
other orgs are doing. We talk to our experts, our leaders, and here's what we believe is the best thing to do, and here's what we're going to do. And then if that doesn't work, or if there ends up being something better that we can do, then we'll do that. But I'm not waiting on how I can serve the
Right.
needs of my employees. So, like, that's really dope.
If you really people first, know that it will come with the challenges of actually having to be uncomfortable with putting people first, and really going about like it, and it's not just about like the benefits and things that you share, but also like how you can best support them. I think every leader has had that challenge where it's just like, okay, this is the crunch time, like what does this look like for you? And so yeah, I 100% agree with you. It just is really something that you have to put on the line.
I'm also curious. As we look at, like, just like the shifting political landscape, and really just like I believe that, like, the DEI, like the fervor that came with George Floyd's murder a couple years ago,
Yeah.
that fervor has definitely waned.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, what do you see as like the future of like the diversity, equity, inclusion role?
This is such a good point, because I get so many people who reach out and they're like, I would like to be in diversity and inclusion. And I think Aubrey actually wrote a blog. It's like, are you really sure you want to do this? Right? Like, this is really what this means. And I think people should know that it is a very hard role. Like, my role with talent and DEI, I'm like, this is a very stressful time for me. Like, hiring is like bananas right now, and DEI is bananas right now. So, what I hope is that it gets integrated into businesses where maybe you don't even know that there's a DEI thing. Like, it's really, one of my friends, Kara Allen, is the chief impact officer at the San Antonio Spurs. So, and it's a new role, chief impact officer. When she told me that she had, I was like, chief impact officer, which means impact is threaded within the organization throughout, right? So there isn't even like a DEI like language in there. It really is about impact. That, I hope, is where we're going, because that is an actionable item. Like, impact is something that you can look at. It's got metrics, it's got, connection across the organization, you have goals, you have KPIs, and it's a way to really just kind of see if you're doing the right thing. So that's what I hope. I think a lot of organizations that said that they needed a DEI person will have to look inward and feel like, what is our why? Like, I believe like everything I do starts with, why am I doing this? Because it will not always be fun. And so in the challenging times, I really need to understand why I set out to do this in the first place. And I think organizations are going to have to do the same thing, because it will not always be easy for them. And like, so are you really just looking to level set certain areas? Is somebody going to be able to be a DEI professional for 30 years? Like, what does that look like in terms of goals and KPIs? It's kind of up in the air right now, but it is, I think what you're right, like that fervor, which almost like I did not love in general, because it was like, so many things are happening while we were at home in a pandemic, like so many things, like so many trends and things and black boxes and, all of that stuff. You just want to make impact at the end of the day.
Yeah. I ask because like I'm looking around and I'm curious about like this, around like ESG. And like, I wonder if like, so I have a theory.
What's your theory?
So my theory is that like, that DEI as a function is it's not going to ever go all the way away, but it's going to be deprioritized, and that ESG will be the new umbrella. Yeah. And then that DEI will fit in the S of that.
Yeah.
And so like, I'm really curious about like, and not today, but like, let's say it's 2022, by like 2026, 2027, like I really believe fundamentally that space, like the persona of that space will change. And that, to your point around like the business integration and like really, it's not, again, I don't want to say de-emphasizing, but I do believe we're trending in a direction where corporately, socially, I think it's the exact opposite, but corporately where it's going to be more focused on leadership, again, like governance in terms of like org structure and design and environmental sustainability and things of that nature. And then, like, again, like the people aspect, there'll be some DEI stuff, but it'll be framed more from the lens of sustainability and experience, and tied to like KPIs around that, like really tied to KPIs that would intimate some level of like business performance, rather than like, oh, like, hey, you just need to feel like you belong. Like, I don't think that that's like the future.
No, I don't think feeling like you belong is like a measurable. I think for me, I think what you're looking at, like when I say everything is connected. So for example, when I look at data, I'm looking at our employee engagement survey. I'm looking at onboarding and exit survey data. I look at candidate experience data, demographic data, and I look at it all and I just try to tell the story of us. Like, this is our story, right? Like, these are all, nothing is separate. And I think what's interesting for me is I almost wonder if ESG is going to be like, that fervor will die down in 3 years and there'll be something else that we will then kind of, because we couldn't even imagine, right? ESG a couple of years ago.
Right.
And so now as we start looking at like hybrid work, remote work, it's hard to tell like what the other trend is going to be, because I think everyone is trying to figure out, how do we, like that Airbnb article, re-examining workplace itself. Like, what is a workplace? So if you're talking about ESG and sustainability and DEI, like we are moving away from the physical space itself and trying to talk about like, how do we exist within a company, and what does a company mean? And like all these different conversations where we have to be prepared to shed a lot of what we thought was really important yesterday.
Word.
And figure out what's important for tomorrow.
Man, like you're right too, because like to your point, like how we've historically defined work is like radically changing, and I do believe that like this next generation of worker is going to continue to push
Yep.
that. Like it's like a
They will not stop with what they have experienced right now. And I do think there are a lot of traditional business people who are trying to use tried and true methods about the economy and like the direction. And we've seen this before. And I'm like, have we though? Because
yeah,
a pandemic mixed with social justice, war, um, bodily rights all happening in coexisting at this one time
right.
is like, uh I don't know what's going to happen next at all. Like, I just know that there are people who are starting their job for the first time and it's been remote and they like it or they don't like it, or they, you know what I mean? Like, and they know how to interact with people. They don't. I don't know. Like, what will be our, like, we always say this, like, what's the new normal? But there is no normal.
It's interesting because like, yeah, you're right. We're talking about ESG today, but like, who knows? And I also think the world is rapidly shifting and changing so aggressively
Yes.
every minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, first of all, it's been a great conversation. I think we could talk all day. Let me ask you this
Good.
though, before I let you
Yes.
go. Give me a few
Mm-hmm.
things you're excited about as you think about the Leaf Group, and like, it's been less than 2 years.
Yep.
But talk to me what you're excited about.
So a couple of things. One of the things that I launched while we when I started this job was something called Escalara, which is a micro learning DEI platform that we do in conjunction with our events and our conversations. But it allows people from a micro learning perspective to go through like learnings, and they're continuous. And I think that has been super exciting for us because it's a young company and it matches my whole goal of like being actionable in your DEI efforts and not just being like, it's the right thing to do. My gut says it's the right thing to do, but it's also like, how do you actually take this, and educate yourself on a way that helps other people in the workplace, because we're all busy too, right? And so that's continuous. I'm excited about that. We recently were acquired by Graham Holdings, which is, Catherine Graham from the Washington Post company, and they have Kaplan and Slate and all these other amazing companies. And I recently became the chair of the DEI Council for all of their companies. And, what's been exciting for me is that they have such an eclectic group of companies. So I am talking to people who are trying to figure out DEI from a restaurant standpoint, from a car dealership standpoint, from Kaplan, and seeing like what they're doing from a global standpoint. Like, I love, like I said, I started this off talking about community and how we learn from each other. And because I think the hidden secret of DEI is that most people do not know how to practically apply what we're all diving deep to learn, right? Like, okay, I learned all these great things. Okay, so what are you doing? And so being able to talk to the different people and different companies that Graham owns, we're sharing how to practically apply. And we're okay with saying, like, I honestly am stuck at this certain place. Can you help me? Like, to further the conversation of truly creating diverse and equitable and inclusive environments. Community is where we all come in and sharing resources and knowledge and not being gatekeepers about like what really works for one company versus the other, which I think sometimes can be the case when we like figure out, like, we have, there are large companies who pride themselves on their culture because they figured it out, and like then they don't share exactly what that looks like, or sometimes it's not exactly what's happening. So removing the boundaries of what it really means to be a community that's knowledge sharing is really exciting for me.
I am excited about the fact that like what's been validated in this conversation
Yeah.
is my impression around your passion around democratizing information, making things accessible and flat. And
Yes.
so the fact that you're
Yes.
excited about that, like, there's again, is more confirmation. I'm really thankful and appreciate this conversation. I typically try to give also like, in terms of like kind of parting words, like as we wrap up, is any shout outs that you have, like any space that you just want to like show anybody some love.
I mean, I'm going to show all of Leaf Group love because you know what? We have gone through this together. Like, these past 2 years of being nearly remote and people really being open. Like, I had no idea when I got this role in the middle of the pandemic also if people were going to be open, my very first event was a talkback session with Ava DuVernay's The 13th. And like, hello, what a great way to start. Let's just talk about the inequities of the 13th Amendment and how it affects people. And we had like 80 plus people show up. And since then, with a company of 400 that are globally, most of our events are 200. So that means people are coming in and really curious. And I shout Leaf Group out for being amazingly curious. I shout out Beverly Carmichael, who was my mentor, who was on our board and the one who got me into talent in the first place and has been extremely beneficial to me so far. And obviously like Aubrey, who's I think is great, and Michelle Kim, who's amazing. And just all the amazing people I've met, including you, on the socials that, you know, are willing to share like knowledge. And like I said, giving access to people so that we can all grow. Cause like, that's the most important thing.
Tara, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
You're a friend. No, of course, you're a friend of the show. Know that you're welcome back anytime.
Oh, this is such a good conversation. It's actually quite cathartic, to be honest with you, because it's really just good to talk to smart people about these things that, you know, we all struggle with. And so 100%. I really appreciate this space.
Well, you're appreciated. And I'm excited about folks hearing this. And let's talk soon.
Yes, please.
All right. Catch you later. Bye. And we're back. Yo, thank you so much. Shout out to the Leaf Group. Shout out to everyone who's listening. Shout out to the team. Listen, like I said, in a week, it's up. All right. Make sure you're following us on social media. All right. Make sure that you're subscribed to our newsletter. Make sure that you're setting your notifications to on. Noti gang, all of that. And this has been Zach with Living Corporate. Make sure you give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. If you take the time to go on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pod, shout out Good Pods, and you give me 4 stars, for real, if you give us 4 stars, yo, I gotta look at you like you're a hater, because that makes no sense. Why take the time? Just give me the 5. We earned it, right? And give a review if you want to give us 6 stars. Shout out to Amy C. Waniger, all right? So until next time, again, this has been Zach. Catch you later. See you in a week. Peace.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.